The first time I heard the name Manfred Schellscheidt was when I played for the Midwest Regional team, and then we played against the East. And I had heard that they had this incredible coach. Their team passed the ball around us almost like we were standing still like cones. And so after the game, I thought to myself, okay, I might need to learn a little bit more about this Manfred Schellscheidt character.
Whether you're a player or a coach, his words just connect. It sounds a little bit like the game's talking to you.
Manny is to U.S. soccer what, maybe Johan Cruyff became to Spain as a coach, someone who's had an influence that's lasted for decades to come.
We used to call like a wizard. He was like this old man that was just full of knowledge.
He's like the Yoda of soccer.
Manfred Schellscheidt is the most unassuming genius the game has ever had.
When we talk about, our identity, the heritage of U.S. soccer, here's the starting point.
No question about it. The voice of the game is a great way to describe Manfred.
He would say, we need originals. This is what he said. No, we don't need copies, we need originals. You can definitely say that about Manfred, that he's an original.
Both soccer and life are extremely complex, and Manny says a lot that he measures your maturity in soccer by how many things you can keep track of at one time. Can you pick up on the cues and clues, he calls them, that the game is sending at you and make decisions that help you through this complexity? And I think that goes for how Manny leads his life too.
More than anything, his gift is his ability to observe what's going on around them. It could be life, it can be people. It certainly is soccer. And his ability then to put what he sees into simple, clear, and oftentimes just beautiful words.
So if that's what we take a philosopher to be, somebody who loves wisdom, then Manfred's a philosopher. That's not the same thing as somebody who has wisdom. It's not the same thing as somebody who puts together little sayings that are nuggets of wisdom. It's not that. It's actually caring about becoming wise.
The art of living is to live the moment. That's what life is all about, That's all you really get, one moment at a time. And what do you make of it, If this corner of the chair is day one, I don't know the game and the game doesn't know me. And the other end of the corner here is a couple of guys that just played in the World Cup. So how do you get from this corner to that corner, right?
He talked a lot about the journey of a player, the journey of a team, right? And he would sort of walk through the steps of what that meant and how a player could go step by step, or a team. And this is exactly how I think about life, right? Not just football, but life.
You have to understand that learning to play for a child, it's like 100 steps. And step one is the kid and the ball.
How is America ever catching on with this game? And what will be the deciding factor for that to happen? And I came to the conclusion that I think it's going to be the ball. The ball has so much magic in it that eventually the kids will play.
For a young kid who loves to play, the amount of time that you can spend with that ball, there's no substitute. There's nothing better.
Well, Manny has always been known for being a big believer that the relationship between you and the ball is the most important.
Skill never was, never will be the product of coaching. It's a love affair of a child with a soccer ball, just putting countless hours in toying around with the ball until the ball listens.
He's always just talked about how the ball is your best friend and how this ball has given us all the opportunity to play this game that has taken us all over the world.
I do remember my first ball. I found it. It was beat up, flat, and I had to sit down with a yarn and a needle to sew it back together. And, you know, of course, as we now played with it, the seams would come loose. So every so often I had to sit down again and put it back, stitch it back together. So that was the first ball. I grew up in Solingen, West Germany. I was in a family farm, you know, cows, horses, pigs, chickens, the whole bit, everything.
He really fell in love with the game clearly from an early age as an escape from his day-to-day life on the farm, which I'm sure was very difficult, working long hours as a kid. And I'm sure during the war, it wasn't much different. I'm sure he doesn't remember much of the war because he was very little.
Our town at the very end got hit very hard by, I think it was the English Air Force that dropped the bombs. So the town was pretty much flattened. There wasn't much standing around. The barn was hit too, that was done. So picture this now, you have to rebuild, you have to get going again.
He didn't speak that much about what was going on in Germany in his early years. We never really had discussions about how any of that history impacted him.
We built that barn with bricks that we got from the destroyed houses in the neighborhood. From ruins, we built a new barn.
So much of that early history, I think, got swept away by his love of the game and love of the ball.
As I now was trying to hit the ball off the door, you know, eventually I didn't only want to hit the door, I wanted to hit the window. So, of course, the problem was the glass got broken, but the good part is that we never replaced it. So, and then I just kept backing up, and you know, further and further, to see from what distance I could hit the window.
He spent a lot of time kind of isolated, it seems, with a ball and not too many people to play with, and became really good at the things that he would need as a foundation to become a really good player once he was able to play in more games.
The ball is the kid's most favorite toy, right? And to master the ball over time is, of course, a long process. Takes time and dedication.
From 3 to 5 years old, that was the only soccer that I knew. It was my grandfather and I in that back room with the couch as a goal.
Things you love will love you back. So if you really love the ball, the time will come when the ball will love you back and do what you wanted to do.
I think he practiced endless hours with it, but for him, it's always about not just him with the ball, but it's him, the ball, and other people. You know, he always says that step one in becoming a player is you and the ball. Step two is you, the ball, and another player. And he says that some players never get to step two.
I remember myself in the first game ever in a club uniform, I was about the most heads down guy out there. You know, he was a strong guy, and I was just having to beat guys because I never, you know, got my head up enough, because all I remember from the first game was socks and feet, because I couldn't raise my vision higher than that.
That was foundation number one, is get your head up. And he categorized guys as either he's a heads up guy or he's a heads down guy.
If the little kid would run into me, he says, "What happened? How come you ran into me?" And yeah, but I didn't see you because they had their head down. So I see now you have to dribble with your head up. You see where I am. And so I wanted them already to understand what body language looks like.
I can remember getting out of a car at a field with Manfred and my dad. And the three of us would be walking, and I'd have my ball.
We are walking, and he's just kicking the ball along. And me kind of sneaking up on him.
And out of nowhere, Manfred would just sneak up in my blind spot and poke the ball away. And I'd kind of look up at him, and he'd go, you always have to be alert. You always have to be paying attention.
Oh, you didn't see me coming. So I already didn't want to miss out on any opportunity. Make the best of your situation that you're in, and not just letting things pass by, Everything can be a challenge.
It was nothing, but it was already a little way for him to make sure that I was paying attention. Those moments, they started when I was 2 years old, 3 years old, and they never stopped.
Soccer seems like it's the game of the foot. It's the game of the eye and the brain. You start off by trying to get the ball to be your friend. And during that period, you're mainly looking down. So your head with the eyes and your ability to take in and process information and make decisions is basically cut off because all you're looking at is the ball in your feet. If you can get your feet to the point of skill where you can now look up.
The day will come when you also see with your mind's eye. And when that starts to happen, time and space issues all of a sudden become pretty obvious, right?
We could be having a Princeton against Seton Hall, and the teams will be warming up, and Manfred can walk over and start talking about how beautiful the sunset is, while I'm panicked about my lineup or the tactics or what's going to happen in the game. Manfred's able to move seamlessly from one moment to the next and just be totally present in that moment.
If you were watching youth games, there could be some young, talented player, but maybe he wasn't doing anything fancy or anything that was spectacular, but just little things to show that he understood how to play or she understood how to play. A touch, a way of looking around. And in the same way, Manfred would turn to the coach or the coaches that were around him, and he would just say, "Did you see it?" And very quickly, he would then get a feel for who was really watching, who was picking up little things.
Just the way that he's able to watch the game, watch players, look at what's going on, and challenge everybody around him in a way that brings out the best in them. That part is so special.
He would constantly be talking about what he saw, what's going on right now. How can we do it a little bit better?
Make it worse some. Yes, good.
This is so optimistic. This is so positive. And so maybe in some way, whatever he experienced as a young person, he just came out of it in such a positive way to be able to look at people, the world, and find a way for everybody to look a little closer at what was going on.
January 31st, 1963, my grandfather heads to the United States to visit his aunt, Tante Elizabeth.
I come here and it's winter time, 31st of January. And winter in New Jersey is not always so nice. And so my aunt says, "Yeah, there's a fellow down the street, there's the German guy. He is involved with the club."
While he's in town, of course, my grandpa can't stay away from the ball long in typical fashion. He needs a way to stay fit, as he puts it, and through just very random circumstantial happenings, he gets invited to train with a local German club
And I know there's a famous story about Rudy Burkhart signing him up to play for maybe Union Sports Club and play at Farchers. And so I know his early experiences were as a player. And he was able to do some great things as a player.
Next thing is, the game comes around on Sunday, and I just show up and thinking I'm going to watch the game. And then they say, oh, no, we want you to play. You know, here's your player pass. And they said, okay, but we want you to play center forward. And now I'm matched up with a Hungarian international, right? That kills me in the air. The field was frozen stiff with a million footprints on from the day before when it was soft, and froze up again, and it was just a total nightmare, you know. But that was day one, and then couldn't get any worse from that point on. It could only get better.
I think that is a really beautiful image of the million footprints on a soggy, muddy field for a lot of reasons. I think the simplicity of the soggy, muddy field resonates with me because Manfred's message is a simple one at the end. It's just be as good as you can be, care, and immerse yourself in each moment.
His entire life was just him following the game and where the game took him and what made sense for where he wanted to go with the game. And he wasn't what you'd think of someone coming to America for a better life, so to speak. I don't think he ever thought of it that way.
I ended up, playing in this area, in the metropolitan area, which in these days was a league of foreigners for the most part, not too many typical Americans playing. And some of them were actually very good, national team players from other countries playing in the German-American League here.
That team ends up being the Elizabeth Sports Club, and they win 2 Open Cup championships.
He played for the Philadelphia Atoms when they won an NASL championship. But little by little, Manfred's mark was in coaching. And at that time in the U.S., coaching opportunities came and went.
If you actually look at his story closely, you'd see that there's a lot of back and forth between America and Germany in his early adulthood.
In Union, the town where my aunt lived, was very much German. You could find a German butcher, you could find a baker, even a German movie theater. So, I could definitely get away without speaking English, when I first came over here. So that made it very easy too, so till you catch on with the language.
His gift for using words, English, his second language, and how he could still paint such a clear picture.
And he would have so many cool phrases, man.
Skill is executing great ideas. The rest is just technique. I can give you glasses, but I can't give you vision. Can you hear the voice of the game? Or the other way I say it is the game talking to you?
I still use phrases that Manfred uses. Simple phrases. Sometimes just telling a player you weren't ready. You come in second too many times. You don't look around enough. Just something that connects with that player in a moment that helps him understand how he can do things a little bit better.
And he had all these isms, the Manny isms, right? But how long does it take us coaches to get to the point where the players don't need us anymore? Then we're done. Like, whoa, can you say it again?
Can I help you as a coach to be the best player that you can be by being yourself?
Manfred always had a beautiful way of thinking about the game. And at the core of all of it is that the game is the teacher.
The game is the best teacher.
You always hear that voice from Manny saying that the game is the best teacher, and he's absolutely right.
That's one of his great expressions that he took from the German school, which is the game is the teacher.
The father of the German coaching school was Sepp Herberger. And Manfred would fill me in a little bit on Sepp and his ideas and how it would get passed down to all the coaches in Germany. And two very famous coaches that came through the German system were Detmar Kramer and Hennes Weisweiler.
Detmar Kramer was unique in many different ways. Everything he would see, he would never forget. Or everything that he would hear, he would never forget.
Detmar was an impressive guy, smart. His nickname was the Little Professor. And he had a real way of getting on things and covering points. It was an academic side to things. And the opposite in the German school at that time was Hennes Weisweiler.
The club I had played for in Germany, Viktoria Köln, the coach was Hennes Weisweiler. But Hennes Weisweiler also was the docent that taught the course at the Sporthochschule Köln.
Manfred would sometimes tell a story about the rivalry between Detmar and Hennes. He would say that Hennes would say that Detmar was a school teacher, too much out of the book. And then in response, Detmar would say, well, Hennes is a farmer. He doesn't speak well. He doesn't have all the right phrases.
I mean, Hennes was, for me, he was unbelievable, you know. Man with a really big heart. And the heart is always the issue, you know. The heart always knows best, right? The head is hit and miss at times.
Interestingly enough, it was Hennes that really was the inspiration for Manfred because it was a more practical way of looking at the game. It was not so much that as the coach, you were the center of everything, but more the Hennes way where you created an environment and you coached little things that you saw.
All the information that a player needs comes from the game and flows in abundance.
But the game is only the teacher if the one who's in charge knows how to use the game the right way and how to create the right situation.
The environment that he created, everyone wanted to be around because it was just about soccer.
Einstein made it loud and clear. He says, I never teach my pupils, I only create a condition in which they can learn. So it's the environment that we create that makes the difference.
The teacher is somebody who creates a situation. The coach is a person who creates a situation that has challenges built into it.
The way he set up training sessions, the way he challenged players, and that was by creating problems for us to solve. So everything he did was to create a problem for us to solve and for us to find the solutions on our own, and I think that's always been the sign of a really good coach.
When you coach, you're constantly trying to create situations that help them see things for themselves.
At Seton Hall, he would always have somebody man-mark me throughout the whole practice, and I always was so frustrated, and I always thought to myself, why does he always have somebody following me around the field like a pest? And he was creating a problem for me to solve.
He never wastes a second. It's always about the game. It's always about, you know, how can he pose a question in a way to make you think about something in a way that maybe you haven't already.
Everything he's saying, like, you have to kind of think and process it first, and then you're like, that makes a ton of sense. I never thought of it like that.
After a while, I found out and realized, you know, giving answers was not the answer. That asking questions was far more productive. And of course, the way I ask the questions, I can guide them in the right direction.
I felt like a pupil. I felt like I was sitting there and I had to pass the test. And again, I too often failed the test. But in failing the test, it helped me figure out a little bit more about who I am and what I wanted to be.
If you were on the field and there's a situation that you need to deal with and you're looking to me for answers, can you imagine what that would look like?
U.S. Soccer years ago brought Detmar Kramer to the U.S., and he was one of the first people to come and run our coaching schools.
The man was absolutely brilliant, you know. He would do the whole thing, 10 hours a day, instruction and practical, all by himself, and seven days a week, including the exams, 2 days of exams, and then start another course and another course.
On his license, it says United States Soccer Federation, A1, next to it. So he was the first coach ever issued an A license in the United States. What is unique is that he didn't always fit in as the type of coach that would be at a coaching school, because his philosophy was totally throw out the manual.
Soccer, more than any other sport I know of, is the sport of practical wisdom. The two-component virtue that's seeing and acting appropriately on the basis of what you see. And that just marries perfectly with what Manfred is all about, or else it helped bring about what Manfred is all about. That is, a sport that shaped him into somebody who is so unusually attentive to what's going on around him.
All of the theories and, all the axioms of coaching that a lot of people are, espousing, he doesn't buy in that. He just believes in developing a player's brain to the point where he can make his own decisions on the field.
That experience of hearing Manfred talk about the steps and how a little soccer brain is developing, that always made a lot of sense. And I think anybody that's been around Manfred, one of the things that he always talks about is the soccer brain, right? The soccer brain, which is telling you what's going on. It's helping you pick up the clues of the game.
At any given moment in a soccer game, you are one of 22. And what you should do next depends on approximately 1,000 considerations that cannot be scripted in advance. And 3 seconds later, it will be a largely different collection of facts. There's so much complexity that you need to take in order to make a good decision. And so this element of seeing and then being able to make good decisions, that's largely what soccer's about.
What kind of clues can we give a player so that he can understand how to take his own journey, his own pathway?
Intelligent energy is the medium that connects the brain to the object, be it the body or the ball. So I always tell the kids, how else would the ball ever know where to go if I don't tell it where to go? The ball would not know. It's just a piece of plastic with air in it.
Each question was weighted with a lesson.
I was 14 years old. Manny Schellscheidt, this wise guy, him and Bob Bradley were actually on the staff, but Manny, probably Bob's mentor in many ways at the time, right? Like getting us to think about the game differently and to use our brains is what he would say, our brains to figure out the solutions of the game. And this was different for me, and I know it was different for young players, even in my time in Red Bull, to see how he influenced those young guys. Where sometimes the young, clever, smart players would get overlooked, he was always protecting those guys because he knew that it's those brains that make the game fast.
I think a lot of American coaches saw me only as a small, weak, slow player, where Manny saw the other side of the story, which was a smart, intelligent guy who could do things with the ball and saw plays ahead of time.
Yeah, my first interaction with Manfred was trying out for that under 16 World Cup team that traveled to China. I was cut and made one of the alternates, and Manfred was an assistant coach on that team. And I was crushed, I was devastated, and I still remember to this day really vividly Manfred pulling me aside and saying, he said, "Jimmy, you're not going to this World Cup, but just go home and make every game you play in, your World Cup.
Every time you go into a session, you make your next pass better than the last one, right? And that's when you get to the point where all of a sudden, you know, the ball starts doing what you want you to do.
What I learned on that day was his ability to combine imagination and reality.
And again, if you go back to Manfred's understanding of Detmar Kramer and Hennes Weisweiler, he preferred Hennes. He preferred Hennes, where it was more practical, where it was about the game, where it was about learning from the game.
He didn't use the textbook, and he used common sense to teach the kid.
It starts to become so scripted that if you start the younger players with that, they'll never have the gifts of creativity and improvisation.
To me, the voice of the game is his ability to have taught me to listen to the game. He always used to tell me that between dribbling, passing, and shooting, that the game will always tell you the answer, and that one of those things will always be the answer.
If you want somebody else to do something, you got to be convinced of it yourself first. So I think the most enthusiastic guy to be in the pickup was myself. But I can't do it by myself. I need others. So now I have to convince others that they want to play with me.
I don't think anyone has said no to a pickup game with my grandfather. I haven't witnessed it. I would love to hear from anyone that has been able to say no and didn't show up.
It's incredible the power Manfred had to get people to say yes. I would lose the ability to say no once I got on the phone with him.
When he and I were coaching together and I was first married, there were times that the phone would ring and Manfred would tell me, we've got a bunch of guys coming up for a game. And I'd have to try to explain to Lindsay that there was no practice that day, but I was going up to play in a game with Manfred.
The guy that I call up in the middle of the night and tell me to play one against one under the street light that shows up, I know this guy really means it. This guy takes it personal. This guy really loves to play.
Hey, Sash, we're playing at the boys' club 10 o'clock tonight. Yeah, well, you see you there. And that was it. It was a 10-second conversation. He let me know that I had to be there at 10 o'clock and the game was starting.
I was always looking for soccer lads. It's almost like an addiction in the end, let's be fair.
The people that he keeps in his circle are the people that aren't going to say no. There's a reason why they're getting that phone call, and it's because they're the soccer rats. They're the people that want to go and play. They're the people that keep it simple, and they may not be the best soccer players in the world, or maybe they are, but they fit his vision of what this game could look like.
I always played in the pickup games, and that was, that was the best part. The organization of it, like 6 different phone calls go around, what field you're meeting at, what gym you're meeting at. In the winter, we played indoors. In the summer, we played at any type of park that he could get.
The minute you start playing, you basically reveal yourself, whether you know it or not, because you just do things in a certain way. When I have a chance to play with somebody, I get an awful lot of information about how does he move around, does he give me the ball when I need it, can I find him when I have the ball and I need to give it to somebody.
If he thought you knew how to play, then he would put you on his team. If he thought you were too complicated and tried too many things that didn't make sense, then you were going on the other team. And every now and then there would be someone that would be ready to play on Manfred's team and he'd be going, oh, no, you're going on the other team.
It's kind of like a ritual because, he goes around and he's just passing out the pennies. And sometimes you'll see people trying to catch his eye.
Manfred would always make the teams, and he would always make sure he was on the best team.
The one that has the pennies controls the game.
I think you knew where you stood with Manny based on what team you were on. And you had to work your way to get onto his team.
Sometimes I was on his team, and sometimes I was not. And a lot of this was determined in the car on the way there when he would ask me what kind of mood I was in.
So Manny would put you on his team and would pick all the best players on his team so that he could win at the end of the day. So you knew that if you were on his team, you were definitely accepted.
Manfred was a very good cheater. He picked the best side.
Now, I often got accused of, they called me cheating, but they wouldn't say that before the game.
Did we have touches? Put that white. Yes, I'm on limit.
Some may think, oh, he's cheating. He's mostly picking the best players. That's not necessarily true. He's picking the players that he selfishly is going to have the best time playing with, who's going to keep it simple.
So he doesn't lose too many pickup games, you know, when he's picking teams. So he's got an unbelievable eye for talent and an unbelievable way of knowing who can play somewhere to make sure he gets the best out of that game.
He wanted to play the games for two reasons. One, he wanted to play. And two, he wanted his coaches to learn through the game and to see the game through his eyes.
And that was part of the teaching in terms of now making good decisions, being easy to play with, seeing the right things, not falling asleep. And so the experiences that you share in the game with him, they came in all ways.
And so this is one of the reasons why he liked to play all the time with the guys, because he thought he could be the right kind of example for what it felt like to play with somebody who knew the game well.
I think the best situation for learning would be an apprenticeship, where you have the chance to spend time with the master.
Manfred, every once in a while, will just throw out these questions.
Most of the questions he asked were somewhat theoretical or rhetorical, but there was always pressure to come up with an answer, right? And the right answer.
And so on this night, he threw out the question, why do we play? And, you know, a bunch of us took different cracks at it, you know, to win, we love competing, to stay fit, all those kinds of answers. And he's like, no, those are all okay, but the reason you play, the reason you do anything is to do it well. And the joy that comes from doing something well is what brings it to life.
The greatest reward for playing is playing well. And playing well, you know, is an awful lot of fun. Playing well also means that you have been probably a great number of times what we call the zone. Right? This feeling that you get from getting it right and being in the zone and playing well is so powerful that you would come back for more.
The state of New Jersey thought that it would help them if Manfred and I would go around to different communities and give what they called a clinic. But they didn't realize that Manfred really wasn't big on clinics per se.
When he first started going around the state with Bob Bradley, they would do these little courses. I mean, they'd go to like Sicklerville, New Jersey, and you know, places that were an hour and a half away, and probably get paid $35 for this session.
Hop in his, at that time, Volkswagen Rabbit and go.
Oh, can you imagine how many conversations we had driving back and forth and talking soccer, right? So that's when you get to know what's going on in somebody else's head, you know. I mean, talk about making a speech. All you really do when you speak, you give somebody else a peek in what's going on in your head.
So we'd get there, we'd never really know what the audience would be. More often than not, it was parents. Parents that were looking for formations, and parents that were looking for drills, and parents that were looking for some way or another answers to what they should be doing when they would coach kids.
Just let them play, let them figure it out, you know. Put them on the field and you know, keep the numbers small. These would be the main themes in the course.
After about 30 minutes, one of the guys raises his hand and says, I brought my notebook and I haven't written one thing down. And Manfred said, well, you're looking for answers and we're not going to give them to you.
And I said, oh my God, here we are trying to talk about the opposite, and look what he walks away with. He wants to know a bunch of drills, right?
My advice to young coaches is you have to understand what's in the book, but when it's time to coach, leave it on the shelf and have some personality and have a way to bring the game to life. And then your coaching will come from that. You'll coach players, you'll coach the game. You don't coach exercises. And all of those things came from my time with Manfred.
First, you learn the basics. And if you're good at it and you have mastered the basics, then you're allowed to break the rules and improvise. And that's when things get interesting.
You know, nowadays, I think there are too many coaches that absolutely only go by the book, and you have to learn about the people in your team. There's no book that can describe the specific team that you have, and there's no book that has a solution for the type of players that you have competing against the players you're playing against.
So I think it was an F license course, and the very first day he had this 3-ring binder of things he was supposed to cover in the course, and maybe for the first 20, 30 minutes, he flipped through it and mentioned a few things in it and covered a couple things that I think he had to cover. And that was it. Then he closed it. And for the rest of the weekend, we were just playing.
What you need to know will always come from the game. And for right now, we will help you out what this voice of the game can look like by either watching you play or, playing with you.
I still remember Manfred and I would be neutral players and we'd pick teams and we'd play 4-a-side. And on the last day, when it came time for the coaching course to end, you couldn't get these people to leave. Like, they just wanted to keep playing.
We just cannot believe what's happening. These guys play beautiful soccer. No more crashing into it. No more need for the ambulance. No more abusing the ball. That didn't mean that they all were technically perfectly fine, but they all had a clear head. They all understood what the game was about so much more than when they first showed up.
He had such a good feel for bringing the game to life and allowing the game to teach itself while having a great balance for when to step in and when to let it ride. It's responding to the demands on that day, and that's not something that you can explain in a manual or a formula.
Everyone would say, well, he was more let the game be the teacher. You can have Manny run the session and so-and-so run a session and give him the same plan, same exercise, 6v6, blah, blah, blah. And Manny's is somehow different.
Watching those adjustments made. So it's not just about learning about the game, it's learning about how an extremely excellent coach changes the little detail. It's really like playing a musical instrument. So a little change here, a little change there, and the educational significance of the exercise is completely different.
It's so much about the messaging. If he wants the game to go a little bit faster, he might make some modifications. He might bring the guys in. I've seen it, and then all of a sudden, as he would say, it's this whole thing comes to life in a way that's beautiful, like this is how he would do it. But it wasn't throw the ball out there and let's have a session, make a couple of points along the way. He understood how to manipulate and improvise and get the desired effect.
He always wants his players to experience the joy that the game can provide and want more of that. And so that starting point is the basis for the way he coaches. It's to fall in love with the game. It's to see the game's possibilities. It's to want more of the feeling that comes from playing the game well.
Fear can have an awful lot of power, but I think fun and enjoyment is stronger because it lasts. It never ends.
There's a tension in soccer between orchestration and improvisation.
That's always the argument, is soccer a form of art or is it a science? And of course the answer is it's both.
He definitely has the German precision about him. But the side that a lot of people don't see is that there's so many things that are free-flowing.
Science is more on the side of defending, because when you really talk about coaching, all they ever do is talk about defending anyhow. If you ever listen to any coach it's all about how not to let the other team play, right? But there's very little that they have to say in terms of helping you to score a goal, because it just comes from within, from the player just doing something that needed to be done.
I think today's emphasis on tactics kind of frustrates him a little bit. Spending too much time making things complicated, giving players too much to think about.
It's a little bit ironic that his trade when he came to the United States was as a machinist. And I'm told that in the shop where they would then, in a tool and die shop, make certain parts, that he was the master. But that always sounded very much like a textbook, that to make a certain piece, this is how you do it. And yet, when it came to everything else around him, he was so much more about the art. He was so much more about the beauty.
A piano, to me, would be probably just a piece of wood. But if a musician sits down, beautiful music comes out of it. Then I asked the soccer kids, so here's the deal. For the musician, the piano becomes the outlet, the instrument. For me, for the soccer player, it's the body and the ball that need to become an instrument for me to express my soccer ideas. Right? So, and it takes time and conditioning so that eventually your body becomes an instrument, and the ball as well. There can be way too much structure, so as coaches we should not try to make the players something that we want them to be.
It shifts the balance toward improvisation. And what it takes to coach people into being great improvisers, that's another kind of teaching altogether.
The art form is the idea. Skill, in my opinion, is executing great ideas. Skill begins with an idea. I want to do something and I can pull it off. That is skill, right? Because the rest is just technique.
The discussions about the game, about life, and his observations, his ability to see everything that was going on around him. That was how we spent our time. And that's how some of the stories evolved.
Someone had to have talked about the wood, the block of wood, and this sculpture of a duck.
I read an article in a golf magazine, and it was a golf pro. He was talking about teaching. And he used this wood carving idea to talk about how you teach.
He would describe a duck. He would say, what you get is a piece of wood, right? That's a player when you first get him.
And then he asked him, where did you get it? And the guy said, well, I didn't get it. I made it myself. And that's beautiful. How'd you do it?
And he just says, I had a block of wood and I just chopped off all the things that didn't look like a duck. Like, what?
And when I heard that story, I thought, that's a lot of what Manfred is trying to describe in coaching.
He cuts away all the nonsense and gets right to the content. Sounds like really, I don't know if that sounds complex or really simple, but for me it's simple. And with him, there's no nonsense.
Chipping away is equally important than trying to add on. So on one hand, we want you to add on things and understand more and more. But on the other hand, we need to understand what you could call even pruning. Pruning meaning chipping things away that have nothing to do with the final outcome.
And your job is to carve all of the excess things away until you get this wooden duck, this perfect little wooden duck. And our job as coaches were to peel away all the layers of things that got in the way of him being the best version of himself or a total original.
Manny's impact, I think, starts in New Jersey and then goes outward to the whole United States.
I think he's one of the forefathers of American soccer.
I think back to that first game that Manfred talks about that he played in at Farchers Grove as a member of Elizabeth Sports Club, and all those footprints on that frozen field that day, and think about the legacy and the footprints that he has left on so many lives.
Manny is the one who opened the door for me in this country. He's the one who gave me an opportunity. He's the one who believed in me.
He found me and he gave me that chance to play at the next level.
For a young guy who loved to play, who loved the game, just any time that I was able to spend around Manfred was always special.
I just like to think of myself as a guy that liked to play and coach and had a good time with it.
Be an original. And I'm sure as a child, I didn't really know what that meant, but it didn't really take long for me to understand when he would point out different players, we would watch games together, or when he would discuss some of my teammates, what he really meant by that. And being an original and not a copy meant that you could really think for yourself. You were able to think on your feet and make your own decisions. You were able to listen to the game and make the right decisions. You weren't just doing something that was programmed or taught to you and was very robotic because a coach had ingrained that in your brain.
When you think about Manfred, the players who know him best and who spend a lot of time with him, it's amazing how little they actually know about his whole background. He played on and coached championship teams in the NASL and the ASL. He's coached pretty much every age group on the national team level, from the full national team through the Olympic team, all the way down to the under 14 national team. He coached the Union Lancers to back-to-back national championships. He had a 20-plus year coaching career at Seton Hall where he had over 200 wins. He's been involved as the head coach for Region 1 ODP and the New Jersey State program. And recently he's also been a coach at the New York Red Bulls Youth Academy.
Because it was always about somebody calling up and saying, look, can you help us out? And the next thing is I sit down with whoever that was and we see whether that makes sense. And if it did, we say, look, it's a handshake and we do it. So I never had a contract ever in my life.
I don't even think it's possible to create a coaching tree for Manfred Schellscheidt because the branches would extend so far and wide that we wouldn't really know how many people he touched.
There's 6 degrees to Manny. So I think anybody who for the most part, I would say 90% of anybody who is in the higher ups of soccer, they have 6 degrees to him. They know someone who's related to Manny in some aspects.
All the coaches that I met on the regional and on the national team level, they were all partners in the same crime, so to speak, and everybody that was involved had a voice.
One time there was a national team event and a bunch of guys from the Northeast were walking by, and Mike Makovich from Chicago says, there they are, the Region 1 Mafia. And then the nickname kind of stuck from there.
Someone came up with a thing called the East Coast Mafia, and it was a running joke in regards to who was who.
The only word that I would change is mafia, so because I didn't think of it as a mafia. I thought of a collegium of like-minded people.
He also had an incredible way with everybody that he spent time with to help that person a little bit with their personal journey in the game.
The staple of a Manfred training session was the game that never ends. The premise was that each play leads to the next play. The most important play is the next play. And so we don't want the session stopping all the time. We want it to keep going. We want you to be forced to react and make decisions all the time.
The game that never ends. Playing pickup with my grandfather, he would always set the rules.
I'm on living.
And there was no true end to the game. There wasn't anything that was necessarily timed. We played to our heart's content and to his heart's content.
You have to have your principles, that you stick with, that the guy you want to be. And I tell you what, the nice part is soccer can do a great job because it can be very rewarding. It can also be very humbling and keep you honest.
I remember the day I got the phone call that my grandfather had had a stroke. And I remember it taking a long time to sink in.
The left side all totally conked out. He couldn't do anything, so I was in a wheelchair.
He had his stroke. And so he was away from the team for probably 3-4 months.
The stroke was devastating for all of us. To see someone, so in love with being able to play and then not being able to play anymore. But it also taught us how to deal with a situation like that.
The game demands the player response.
You could also interpret that as life demands and the person responds.
Little by little at the Kessler Institute, they rehabbed me. In the beginning, it was just simply standing up because I couldn't even stand up, So they had to hold on to me and put me against the wall and see if I could still. I had no balance whatsoever,
It becomes quickly matter of fact. This is what it is, So he accepts it. He does his exercises. He's never looking for the pity, but this is what it is. And he still, as soon as he could start coming around, he did.
We would always still talk about the pickup games that getting him ready for the pickup games again, where then we could be back out on the pitch and enjoying the time with each other.
It doesn't surprise me at all that as he's recovering from his stroke, he's using that same foam ball and the couch, much like he used with me growing up, to kind of relearn his body and to, get back those mastering the ball skills that he, of course, had his entire life. And after stroke, you're just relearning everything from scratch. And that's no different than when he was first starting out with soccer and all he had was his first ball in a barn in Germany.
People, I always say in play are most happy, most free, and most human in play. So play is really an enormous source of enjoyment and, puts you on a path to find out who you are. The discovery of inner values, things that you're good at, things that you like. So play is essential.
Manfred has always had this gift to open up the player's eyes and open up the player's mind to the way the game will play out.
This is what this game is all about, making something happen. Okay, that does it. I think about tomorrow with the help of yesterday to get the most out of today.
Always gotta be paying attention.